the Jordan Valley is absolutely intriguing. The massive tower there, which again dates back right to the end of the last ice age, a huge megalithic tower with the world's oldest known megalithic stairway that runs up inside it. So what's emerging as a result, if Göbekli Tepe hadn't been found, none of this would have happened. But it's led to a widespread interest
in a desolate, rocky region of Turkey, a place considered the earliest cradle of humanity. Archaeologists have unearthed a mysterious carved stone pillar, concealed for 11,000 years beneath the dust of time. And what they found sent chills down everyone's spines. It wasn't an image of fierce animals, nor a sacred deity. It was simply a grotesque face, eyes sunk deep like an abyss, a sharply prominent nose bridge, and a wide open mouth gaping as if snarling. That figure alone is enough to give you goosebumps, but if it were just a lifeless statue, the story would end there. Yet, as scientists dared to decipher it, a jaw-dropping secret slowly emerged, one powerful enough to upend the entire history of mankind, because the people of that era were virtually incapable of crafting such a detailed masterpiece. So, what exactly is this bizarre statue, and what terrifying secret are archaeologists still keeping hidden from the world? All will be revealed in today's video. Astonishing discovery. If you've ever set foot in the southeastern region of Turkey, you'll find a landscape almost exclusively made up of rock, sun, and wind. Everything is arid and silent, seemingly nothing but barren hills. Yet, beneath that seemingly ordinary layer of earth lies hidden one of the oldest parts of human history. This area is called Taş Tepeler, which means stone hills. It's a cluster of over a dozen ancient sites, the most famous of which is Göbekli Tepe, considered the world's oldest temple, dating back over 11,000 years. Here, enormous T-shaped stone pillars are carved with images of animals like foxes, snakes, vultures, and bulls. All of this suggests that the people of that time already believed in something greater than themselves, long before they knew about agriculture or writing. However, just about 37 miles from Göbekli Tepe, there's a lesser-known place, Karahantepe. When archaeologists began excavations, they realized this site was no less important. It might even be older. Karahantepe is nestled in the limestone hills of Şanlıurfa province. From a distance, it appears only as a sand-covered mound, a few collapsed walls, and scattered stone fragments. But underneath is another world. Walls are carved directly into the bedrock. Large T-pillars are arranged in circles, and deep underground rooms were once used for ancient rituals. The history of Karahantepe started gaining attention in the late 1990s when a few researchers discovered fragments of pillars similar in style to Göbekli Tepe's. It wasn't until 2019, however, that Professor Necmi Karl and the Istanbul University archaeological team officially began large-scale excavations. They used satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar to survey the area beneath the sand layer. Regular circles and strange structures began to emerge. Digging down, the research team found hundreds of stone pillars, elaborately carved chambers, and many monolithic human statues made of red sandstone. Some statues had very unusual details: a person with a snake head, a man holding a fertility symbol, or a figure placing a hand over their chest. These carvings show that the ancient people here knew how to express their emotions and beliefs through imagery. What's even more astounding is that the structure was preserved almost completely intact. It seems that after centuries of use, the ancient inhabitants deliberately filled the entire complex with earth and stone debris. No one knows the real reason. Perhaps they wanted to close off a sacred era, or simply protect the site from collapsing. This very action helped Karahantepe survive almost perfectly preserved to this day. By 2024, the excavation site became a major Turkish archaeological project. Hundreds of experts and volunteers work year-round, utilizing modern 3D scanning equipment. The more they study, the more details they uncover that force the scientific community to reconsider obsidian tools brought from hundreds of miles away, deliberately arranged animal bones, and traces of red paint still visible on the walls, indicating the place was once full of color, light, and life. Then, in one corner of the excavation area, Professor Carroll's team discovered an unusually short T-pillar, half buried under the soil. It was unlike anything they had seen. Its surface was smooth, and it was slightly tilted, as if someone had deliberately placed it there for a special reason. The whole team began working more slowly, They used soft brushes to sweep away each layer of dust, trying to preserve every detail. In the intense summer heat, the work was slow. Then one afternoon, as the sun was about to set, a student noticed a small curve running along the pillar's body. At first, everyone thought it was just a natural crack, but as a few more strokes of the brush cleared the dirt, the outline of a nose bridge began to appear. The team held their breath. They continued to clean gently. 2 deep eye sockets gradually emerged, followed by the line of a jawbone. Everyone understood they had just discovered a human face carved onto the stone pillar, which had potentially been resting there for over 11,000 years. This was the first time in the Tashtepler region that a distinct human face had been clearly sculpted in stone. Not an animal, not an abstract symbol, but an actual human face. As the setting sun slanted across the excavation pit, the shadows of the eye sockets and cheekbones were cast onto the ground. Everyone stood in silent awe, even though it was just stone. The face gave the feeling of someone watching them from the distant past. In that moment, everyone knew they had touched something extraordinary, but to truly understand the significance of this face, the world needs to hear the story that the stone is about to tell. Decoding the meaning of the human head. After several weeks of excavation, in the final days of the archaeological season, Professor Nekmi Karul's team at Karahantepe unexpectedly made an unprecedented discovery: a human face carved onto a T-shaped stone pillar, approximately 4.4 feet, 1.35 meters tall. The pillar was lying on its side, partially buried, and initially, no one thought it was special, but when it was uprighted for examination, under the afternoon sun, a prominent nose bridge, 2 deep eye sockets, and a sharp jawline gradually emerged. The whole team was stunned. It wasn't a random crack or a decorative pattern. It was clearly a human face, something that, after decades of research in the Tashtepler area, no one had ever seen previously. The T-pillars at Göbekli Tepe and Karahantepe were considered architectural components. They often featured incised arms, hands, or belts, leading many to believe they were symbolic representations of the human form, but limited to the body, never including a face. Now, with this discovery, the final missing piece has appeared. Professor Carroll told reporters that this finding strengthens the hypothesis that the T-pillars are actually giant, stylized human figures, not just structural support columns. In other words, the ancient people at Karahantepe were not just building with stone, they were creating stone personages, and now one of them has a face. The work of cleaning the surface proceeded with extreme care. Archaeologists used soft brushes, avoiding scratching the smooth sandstone. When the dust was completely wiped away, the face became clearer: a high nose, deep eyes, prominent cheekbones, and an almost serene expression. There was no mouth or ears, only basic features, but enough to realize that the ancients had intentionally carved a human figure, not a symbol. Experts measured, photographed, and 3D scanned the entire pillar's surface. Traces of stone tools were still visible, evenly and rhythmically hammered marks, suggesting the carver was highly skilled and controlled their hand force well. Analyzing the soil layers around the pillar, they found carbonized material fragments in the mortar and plaster nearby. Based on this, the site was dated to the early 9th millennium BCE, around 9400 to 8000 BCE, along with many other sites in the region. This proves that Karahantepe was used by ancient people for hundreds of years before they deliberately filled the entire structure and departed. The Turkish Ministry of Culture later called this the first example in the Neolithic period where humans carved their own face onto a T-pillar. In other words, for the first time in history, we have evidence that the ancients carved their own image, not that of animals or deities. The value of this discovery lies not only in the art, but also in the thought process. It demonstrates that over 11,000 years ago, humans began to develop a sense of self-awareness. They knew who they were and wanted to record that by carving it in stone. Archaeologists call this a turning point in human cognition. Throughout the Stone Age, humans typically only drew animals, the moon, or ritual symbols, but at Karahantepe, they introduced a realistic human image into the architecture for the first time, a massive shift, much like when humans first looked into a mirror and saw their own face. Many researchers believe this face might represent a deity or the community's spiritual leader. There's also the theory that it simply symbolizes humanity in general, a way to show reverence for life. Regardless of the correct interpretation, everyone agrees this discovery completely changes how we view the prehistoric era. It shows that the people living here weren't just hunting, gathering, or erecting stone posts. They were creating their own symbolic representations. The Turkish Ministry of Culture even considers this finding proof that the annual investment of over $150 million in the country's archaeology sector is yielding tangible results. They hope Karahantepe will become a new center, helping the world better understand the earliest phase of human civilization. Professor Carroll, who has been dedicated to this region for over 2 decades, shared that when he looks at the face, he feels like he's being greeted by the ancient people. He said, "It's a moment when the past is no longer distant. We can sense that the person who carved this face once had thoughts, emotions, and desires just like us." That day, as the sun set, the final light illuminated the stone pillar, and the shadow of the face stretched long on the ground. No one spoke. They just stood and watched for a long time. That face, though carved more than 10 millennia ago, still evoked something deeply human: curiosity, belief, and the desire to leave a mark for the future. A turning point in human history. When the human face statue at Karahantepe was announced, the entire global archaeological community was buzzing. For most of the public, it was just a strange and beautiful discovery. But for scientists, it was something that shouldn't exist. Because if its date is accurate, our entire understanding of human history will have to be rewritten. Until now, it was believed that the ability to depict humans, especially the face, only emerged after societies had formed. That is, people had to wait until they learned farming, had villages, and religion before developing the art of self-representation. That timeline falls around 6,000 to 7,000 BCE, when Egypt and Mesopotamia began erecting statues, painting, and carving human figures. However, the face at Karahantepe is dated over 11,000 years old, predating the civilizations we once considered the first. This makes the discovery a paradox. By all existing theories, it shouldn't exist. Yet it is clearly right before their eyes. 3D scans and close-up images show that the face was carved with great care. The lines are not random: a high nose bridge, deep eye sockets, prominent cheekbones, and a neat jawline. The early morning light hitting it gives it a real sense of depth. And in the afternoon, the shadows cast by the eye sockets make the face more vivid. This suggests that the creator didn't just casually chip away at a rock. They understood very well how light interacts with form. This is a level of observation and visual thinking that we didn't expect could exist in the Neolithic period. Professor Necmi Karul, who leads the project, said this discovery is what forced him and his colleagues to change their perspective. They used to think the T-shaped stone pillars were merely architectural elements, symbolic columns. But now, seeing the clear face, they believe these pillars are actually personifications of humans. Previously, at Göbekli Tepe, there were pillars carved with hands, belts, and fox hides, but they lacked a face. Now, the final piece of the puzzle has appeared. Humans of that time didn't just know how to create shapes, they started caring about appearance, about their own faces. Many scientists call this a turning point in human cognition. The act of carving a face demonstrates a very different consciousness, self-awareness. It is no longer a symbol of an animal, the sun, or a deity, but the image of a human, of themselves. This means that at a time when humanity didn't know how to write or smelt copper, they felt the need to carve their own image and make it endure through time. That fact alone is enough for researchers to believe that humans understood the self thousands of years earlier than we thought. Examining the context of the pillar, archaeologists found it was placed in an oval-shaped room, surrounded by larger pillars without faces. Perhaps this face was the center of a ritual, where everyone turned their gaze during ceremonies or prayers. Some scholars suggest it is the image of a protective deity, seen as the guardian of the temple. But there is also the theory that it is simply a face symbolizing the entire community, a way for the ancients to mark the existence of humanity in the mysterious world they inhabited. What further intrigues researchers is that after a long period of use, The residents of Karahantepe deliberately filled the entire structure and abandoned the place. Everything was buried with earth and stones, almost as if to protect it from time. This action leads many to believe that carving the face might have been the final part of a ritual, like a farewell, or a way to lock down the sacred past before they left. Perhaps for them, this face was a promise, a message, or simply a way of saying, "We were here." On archaeological forums, many jokingly say that this face made old history blush. But the story behind it makes everyone think, because that face, though carved more than 10 millennia ago, still carries something profoundly human: curiosity, reverence, and the need to leave a trace. It is not just stone, it is memory. It is proof that humans, in any era, always want to be remembered. Today, if you visit Karahantepe, you will find the stone pillar protected in a sheltered area. Visitors can only look through a glass panel, unable to touch it, under the gentle light. The face maintains the serene look it had when first discovered. There is no smile, no particular expression. Yet people still feel as if it is looking back at them, perhaps because everyone realizes it is not just the face of the ancients, it is a reflection of humanity today. Perhaps that's why many archaeologists call it the face that shouldn't exist. Theoretically, it appeared too early, exceeding all the boundaries that science had drawn. But thanks to it, we realize that human intellect does not follow a straight line, and sometimes, the most illogical things are precisely the true fragments of history. More mysteries to be revealed. After more than 11,000 years lying dormant beneath the earth, the face at Karahantepe has emerged like a greeting from the past. But perhaps the most exciting part of this discovery is not in the answers, but in the new questions it opens up. Because every time people think they've understood history, the ground reveals something else that makes everything have to be re-examined. Today, the Taş Tepeler region, including over 10 ancient sites like Göbekli Tepe, Karahantepe, Harbetsuvan, and Sayburç, is considered the archaeological heart of Turkey. The government spends hundreds of millions of dollars annually to expand excavation and conservation efforts. Hundreds of scientists, engineers, and volunteers work year-round, using advanced technologies like ground-penetrating radar, laser scanning, and 3D modeling to see through the desert ground. And what's remarkable is that many other places in this region have yet to be excavated. Satellite images show circles, structures, and shadows beneath the surface that closely resemble what was seen at Göbekli Tepe before its discovery. In other words, there may still be other faces, other statues, and even larger complexes lying dormant under the soil, waiting to be found. Some archaeologists believe that Karahantepe is just a small part of a network of ancient ritual sites. Stretching across southeastern Turkey, each hill in the Taş Tepeler area has its own characteristics, but they may all belong to a unified culture, a culture that existed long before Egypt or Mesopotamia were born. If confirmed, it would be a major turning point, as the concept of the first civilization would have to be completely rewritten. The face at Karahantepe may only be the first piece in that puzzle. Professor Necmi Karul once said, "We have only opened a small door. Most of what is important is still underground." He believes that excavations over the next 10 years will bring many surprises to the world. Potentially larger human statues, unusual carvings, or even complete ritual complexes built during the same period. Interestingly, thanks to modern technology, archaeologists no longer need to excavate everything as before. Scanning equipment can detect voids, walls, and columns dozens of feet deep, helping them see the structure before putting a shovel to the ground. In recent scans, the research team has noticed many upright stone blocks placed parallel to each other in the eastern part of Karahantepe, suggesting there may be at least a few other pillars similar to the one with the face. If so, we may soon witness a series of new faces emerging, each carrying its own expression and story. Perhaps one of them will be smiling, or have a look of sadness. Perhaps they will reveal how people of that time perceived life and death, because for them, carving a face wasn't about aesthetics. It might have been a way to communicate with the unseen world. What moves researchers is the coincidence between how the ancient people treated the structure and how we are doing today, after completing their rituals. The ancients deliberately buried everything as if to keep a secret for the future. And now, as we dig it up, we are using all our efforts to preserve and shelter it once again. It's like two eras reconnecting across thousands of years. one side concealing, the other preserving. Many archaeologists call this a dialogue between two times. When we excavate, it's not just about learning about them, it's also about learning to listen. Because sometimes, what they left behind isn't meant to be decoded, but to remind us. Karahantepe, with everything that has been found, is a reminder that human intellect and belief can arise even without cities, religion, or writing. From that stone face, we can imagine an ancient craftsman sitting in the sun and wind, a stone tool in hand, carefully tapping each small stroke onto the soft sandstone block. Perhaps he never thought that thousands of years later, someone would be standing and admiring his work. He just wanted to leave some sign, some evidence that he once existed. And perhaps that is precisely what we are doing today, recording, preserving, and continuing to tell their story so that no one is forgotten. Many people ask, will we find anything stranger? The answer, perhaps, is a definite yes. Because if an entire network of underground temples has been discovered in just a few decades, who knows how many more secrets are lying somewhere? Beneath yards of sand and stone, every new discovery at Taş Tepeler shifts history a little further. And perhaps, the face at Karahantepe is only the beginning of a much longer story. See, if you found the story we told helpful in understanding ancient history, please support us by liking, sharing the video, and subscribing to the channel so you don't miss other exciting videos. The information is compiled in good faith and with respect for ancient civilizations. If there are any errors, we are ready to correct them upon receiving reliable academic feedback. We are not responsible if you misunderstand or misapply this content.